Welcome back. Still tuned in to Salam Media with myself, Salailo Makwidi. The time is 24 minutes past 9, and we'll be now focusing on a very, very important topic, and one that is, I think, at the heart of the conversation, particularly when it comes to South Africa and the USA and the relations between these two countries. The African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA for short, has long been seen as a key trade mechanism between the United States and Africa, granting duty free access for certain African exports to the US. However, as South Africa strengthens its trade ties within BRICS and through the African Continental Free Trade Area, questions arise about whether AGOA still holds real economic leverage, with growing calls for de-dollarization and shifting global trade dynamics. Is the US still in a position to dictate economic terms to South Africa? And to help us discuss and dissect this, we're joined by Patrick Lukusa Kadima, a lecturer at Wits Business School specializing in international law, global geopolitics, and international cooperation and multilateralism. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning. And good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers and your listeners.
I think, Patrick, before we kickstart the conversation, I would like to just get your reaction on the bilateral ties between South Africa specifically and the United States of America. We've all seen in the last 2 weeks that has been the headline that has, taken the attention of almost the entire world. Donald Trump's utterances about South Africa and how we run our business here, the granting of special refugee status to white South Africans, sanctions, PEPFAR, USA aid. It's been a busy couple of weeks. How can we encapsulate it and summarize it?
I mean, it has been a difficult, time not only for South Africa but even certain countries in the world. The European Union yesterday just released a statement saying it was devastated by the United States government on imposing, I think, tariffs on their alumni and steel. So we find ourselves at a time where this Trump administration lacks information, lacks scientific evidence, lacks proper credible information to make a decision. They are doing these decisions of theirs, the executive orders, just hastily, without listening, without understanding what is needed or what one has to do. So I mean, in terms of the bilateral relations between South Africa and the United States of America, I would say, for one, that it's at a point where there are seemingly probably low tensions between the two countries. I mean, we've seen how Pretoria stood firm, against Washington's move in terms of various executive orders, And for me, it's not the problem of, it's not, we cannot blame South Africa for this. We can only blame the United States of America and the Trump administration for not having sufficient evidence and proper credible information to come to a decision and stop all types of, for example, aid and writing all those statements that they are doing.
I want to focus now on South Africa's trade position. I think in what one can call a shifting global landscape. Number one, how significant is South Africa's reliance on AGOA when you speak, real economic terms? And also, many argue that AGOA itself only benefits the US more than South Africa. From a trade law perspective, do you agree with this assessment?
I'm not, yeah, from a trade law perspective, I'm not a trade law, I should say I'm not a trade law expert in that. But what I can say from this angle is that, look, there's always imbalances between when countries trade, right? And this is, for example, let's say the African countries or certain African countries trade with China, right? For example, there are always going to be trade imbalances. That's why countries need to always, during the deal, try to balance it out to favor both of them at an equal footing, right? It's the same with when an African country is trading with another big country in Europe. There will always be those trade imbalances. It will never be on an equal footing. That's why it's always best that African countries strive to have an equal footing. Look, South Africa has always had a great record of having friendly relationships with various countries on the continent and out of the continent, right? And with AGOA, obviously, it will benefit the Americans more, but it also benefits South Africa and any other African country that's part of this to a certain extent, right? So, and we have seen in previous times where the president has said that South Africa and African countries should not be looking towards east or west, but should remain neutral, right? And try to achieve fair trade goals and so on and so forth. So for me, I just believe that as much as China is the largest trading partner, it's also beneficial for us to have trade with other countries such as America. But that should not be at a cost of where African countries are put onto a corner, right? Onto a corner and told, you do this or I take you out. Then that is a violation of fair trade, fair trading laws and so on and so forth. We are sovereign countries in the continent. South Africa is a sovereign country rooted in constitutional democracy and so on and so forth, right? And you cannot afford, to put yourself into a corner because one is telling you that you must do this if you want me to continue keeping you here. That, I think, should be the last straw where, a sovereign country should say, no, this is where we draw the line.
How do you see, South Africa and its trading policies change with the rise of the intra-African trade and BRICS cooperation? Are we in a position to mitigate the impact of potential AGOA exclusion? And is it a profitable move? As you mentioned, look more to the east and the west. Could it be the future of South Africa when it comes to trade?
No, I don't think. I don't think South Africa wants to look towards the east only. But we need to acknowledge that the world is changing, right? The world is changing. There are circumstances, and we should always read it in the context of what is happening, right? The African Continental Free Trade Agreement is a very important one for African countries, right? It cannot be that Africa trades with other countries outside, right? But then within its own, there are trade barriers and red tapes. So that is an important trade agreement. It should be achieved, right? It has been slow. Implementation has been slow, but it should be achieved because then a single market needs to exist for this continent. It's unfortunate this has not happened for many years, right? And but now there are signs that it's moving slowly to set up and establish itself. So I think that that should be the most important priority, not only for South Africa, but for many other African countries, to be able to establish and have a solid continental free trade area. Then with that, then you are certain that together as a continental free trade area, you can respond and you can cushion yourselves from backlashes such as what we are seeing currently. With the BRICS, right? The BRICS regional bloc, we need to understand it as a solidarity group, if I may put it that way, that was created. Why was it created at the beginning, right? It was created for these emerging economies to come together and try to foster relationships, economic relationships and so on and so forth. It has now grown big with a lot of countries in the global south that have felt that their voice has not been heard in various platforms across the globe, right? In other multilateral institutions, right? And here they are forging a relationship going forward, right? And they're talking about trade, so on and so forth, one currency and so on and so forth. Those are very complicated topics, I think, that BRICS is starting to enter into, because I believe that with it increasing its membership comes complexities in how they should forge the way forward. I mean, every regional bloc or any bloc has its challenges. But I think with BRICS, it becomes a bit difficult, because with a lot of members in it, then it will be difficult to take decisions, because it's decisions on consensus. And we've seen previously that with the increase of the BRICS members, it has also led to some disagreement on some stuff, where there were no consensus and so on and so forth. But it is an alternative, for countries that feel that American exceptionalism is over, it's dying, and that there needs to be a new alternative to the world order. I mean, I always tell friends and colleagues that I'm a believer that even the Roman Empire, did crash. It did not think it was going to. I mean, it thought it was going to survive. And always the strongest empire. It crashed. I know there is someone who always says history is littered with empires that thought they will never bend or go down. So I think these are the complexities that we are facing, and I think African countries should not particularly throw themselves in shoes and say we're going to face east or west, but remain neutral and focus on their African continental free trade area, because it's a very important piece of how am I going to put it? Free trade for African countries is very important, because then it will allow the African continent to prosper and trade within each other without barriers. And that will cushion us a lot from externalities. For example, we see the European Union, it says it's going to respond. They're going to respond because they have a single market, right? They're able to respond to the American government's tariff on whether it's a steel and so on and so forth, and and respond well. But with African countries, you can't do that, because you do not have a free trade area that's established properly, right? And that's where the challenge comes in. But for other countries such as South Africa, they should not, and like I've said, they should not at all costs be put into a corner by an administration that's led by misinformation, without research, and then be forced to say you need to do this, otherwise we are going to do we are going to take away we are going to take you away from AGOA. That should never ever be tolerated.
And do you think it not being tolerated would be maybe South Africa itself imposing say somewhat retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports? And number two, do you think the U.S. or Washington itself underestimates the economic consequences of restricting trade with South Africa on the American market?
Yeah. I think I don't know the response that Pretoria should take, in terms of this, but I think on your second question, America really underestimates, and I'm saying to you because there is no factual basis in the decisions they're taking. They've not understood the economic consequences of what they are doing, right? You do not want to upset, you know, a country such as South Africa that has influence on the continent, right? That is Africa's largest economy, right? You do not want to do that. There are obviously going to be consequences that will flow from that. America will obviously suffer consequences if they continue in that path. So it's going to hit South Africa, but it's also going to hit the United States of America. And I just think that I think Pretoria has taken that diplomatic channel, to to try to speak to the American counterparts, but it seems that it's not getting to them. It's not getting to the Washington people, and I think that maybe, and just maybe, the South African government should look towards getting these lobby firms in America, you know, hire one lobby firm that is based in Washington, that has a track record of accessing the Republican, Congress, the Republican politicians, senators, and try to get them to speak to the White House, people, to tell them this is it, this is the evidence, this is the information, this is true. Because the lack of misinformation that's on social media, especially by the right hand man to the men leading the White House, Elon Musk, is a lot, So I think that should be one way the government should look at hiring a lobby firm, because these lobby firms are used a lot, in America. That's the nature of American politics, having lobby firms that try to lobby the White House, the president, and so on and so forth.
And just last before I let you go, Patrick, I think you make some very, very pertinent points. But from an average normal South African's point of view, I know right now, speaking of very high economic terms, it seems very complex, and it's political jargon that a lot of day-to-day normal average South Africans might not understand. The average South African right now, the question that they need to be answered is, should we be preparing ourselves for tough times ahead? That's what they want to know. And how would you answer that question?
That's a much difficult one to answer, but I don't think it will be heavy consequences. I don't think it will impact the economy that much, but we will feel it in certain areas. We will feel it in certain areas. But I just saw that yesterday the American embassy, for example, that said PEPFAR, will continue. And that's the program that assists us in fighting HIV. So I just, if, for example, that was going to be the issue, that they had withdrawn that money, then we were going to feel it. The people in the rural areas that maybe were counting on mobile clinics and so on and so forth were going to feel it. But in terms of trade and so on and so forth, I think that, if this continues, obviously it's going to hit us, but I don't think it will be enough to damage the economy and so on and so forth.
All right. I think we're going to leave on that note. You answered the most important question that I think a lot of South Africans are currently asking themselves and are probably worried about. But we're going to leave it here for now, Patrick. Really, really appreciate it. And thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
There you go. That was Patrick Kadima. And he's making some very, very important and very patent points. He's a lecturer at Wits Business School and focuses on international law, global geopolitics, and international cooperation and multilateralism. And I think that's the question, as a normal day-to-day average South African, middle to lower class, has a 9-to-5 job, doesn't run a big business, is hired by private company or by the state. All of this high cerebral conversations, this political jargon that, all of the analysts and the experts and all the academics always, spew out, and always throwing at our faces: free trade agreements and sanctions and tariffs and lobbying and it can get a bit confusing sometimes. And the question that we all want to know as average South Africans living in this beautiful country is, should we be preparing ourselves for difficult times? There seems to be a concerted effort by the White House to target South Africa. I mean, each and every week, the name of our beautiful country is making the rounds in the White House. There's a deliberate attempt to discredit South Africa. There's a deliberate attempt to almost punish South Africa. A lot of people saying punish South Africa because of the ICJ case that South Africa presented against Israel, literally putting Israel naked in front of the world, saying, you are committing a genocide in Palestine. And the United States of America is aiding you. They are being aids to this genocide. They're funding this genocide, and both of you should be held accountable. Is that maybe the reason why all of a sudden we see this focus and this attention and this trying to discredit and strangle South Africa on the international and global sphere, to say these guys are the bad guys. There's a genocide against the white minority in South Africa. Certain classes of people are not treated well. We should be cutting PEPFAR to South Africa. There should be no more U.S. aid coming to South Africa to help them manage and contain the HIV and AIDS pandemic. There seems to be a deliberate effort, and at the forefront of all of that is, well, an Elon Musk who was born right in Pretoria. I think there's a lot to think about. I don't think Donald Trump just woke up one day and his advisors and just decided to say, what's happening in South Africa? Let's find something. I think this has a lot to do with, number one, BRICS, talks of de-dollarization, us moving away from the West and not seeing them as close allies, number one. Number two, the ICJ case, South Africa being very vocal and unequivocal for their support for Palestine. Those two things are ultimately the reason why. Oh, don't forget Russia also, and how we went about, the discourse around the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and having, a Russian delegation come to South Africa for the BRICS summit a few years ago. So there's a lot that we have been doing as South Africa on the diplomacy front that doesn't sit well with the United States of America. They no longer see us as an ally on the African continent. They no longer see us as their gateway to the continent. They have new kids on the block now. They are playing friendly with Kenya. They're playing friendly with Rwanda. And South Africa is now seen as an ally of the East. We are friends with China. We are friends with Russia. We stand up for the people of Palestine. And I think we've chosen a side. Well, our leaders have chosen a side for us. And whether you agree with it or not is a conversation for another day. But the side that they've chosen, I think in hindsight, if you really take a look at it, you read into it, I'd be surprised if you don't agree with it. I'd be surprised if you don't agree with the fact that South Africa took Israel to the ICJ and presented that genocide case. I'd be surprised if you don't see South Africa supporting the need for de-dollarization and trade agreements with BRICS nations being important. Maybe the Russia-Ukraine one might be one that you might be sitting on a fence with, but the other ones just seem legit and they seem just. And it's evident that South Africa is being punished by the United States of America for that. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.